Morning, all. I haven't done this in a little bit, so I figured we'd do an early morning stream because we all live in the hellscape where we have to homeschool our kids and work from home and all that bullshit. So I figured I would get on this morning and talk about something. So if you find me angry about something in the morning, it's generally because I have been enraged by a post or a tweet or whatever the hell while, on the shitter in the morning. And today's particular post was a story about how when Joe Biden's son, Joe Biden's son, what's his name? Beau Biden. That's his name. I thought it was like Crew or Rue or something like that. But Beau Biden. When Beau Biden got cancer, he was diagnosed with cancer. There's a story floating around, and I don't know if this is true or if this is just like Joe Biden campaign shit, that Joe Biden considered selling his home to pay for the treatment that Beau would need. Because it was going to be so expensive that Joe thought he was either going to face bankruptcy, and this is while he's the sitting vice president of the United States, just so we're all on the same page. And he looked at that situation and said, well, I think the most financially savvy thing for me to do is sell my home to pay for my son's cancer treatment. And upon hearing this, our Lord and Savior Barack Obama offered to pay for Joe's, offered to help pay a portion of Beau's treatment. And as we all know, Beau went into cancer treatment and then subsequently passed away, right? And this was, I don't know, every minute is a year now, but I think it was like less than a decade ago. It was in the last 10 years that this happened. And here, I'll just Google Beau Biden. Yeah, he died in May 30th, 2015. So the guy experienced personally experienced through his own son with a wife and children. I mean, a whole part of his family was fractured by his son, who I think is his oldest son, getting cancer and needing treatment. And Joe Biden's response to this, in the face of a medical system that clearly does not give a shit, that clearly is, if Beau Biden had been born in Germany or India or Cuba, for fuck's sake, he would have received round-the-clock, top-of-the-line care in order to give him the best chance to fight cancer. There wouldn't have been a pause for them to figure out how they were going to pay for it. There wouldn't have been an extra meeting with the doctor to figure out how much debt they were going to have to go in to make it happen. He would have just been taken care of. Period, paragraph, end of story. And in the face of this, now I could understand if Joe Biden's response to that was, well, that was my personal experience, and therefore I am unaware of other people going through that. And plus, I think that the best way to beat Trump is I need to amass a giant, enormous, ridiculous amount of money. And if I come out for something like Medicare for All or universal health care, then I'm going to lose a lot of donors, which is going to hurt me in the game to raise more money than Trump and beat Trump. I could understand that theory. I could, right? I could understand him thinking that way, and I could understand him saying, this is what I have to do, but I'm going to shut the fuck up about healthcare, and I'm going to leave it up to other Democrats and the Democratic Party to come up with a solution put it on my desk, and I will sign it. Right? Whether that's Medicare for all, or it's a public option, or whatever the hell. Come up with a solution that you can get through Congress, put it on my desk, and I will sign it. But I'm going to campaign on the idea that we are going to get every American in this country health care. Not affordable health care, because what does that mean? Affordable to who? Not access to health care. Oh, okay, I have access to buying a Lamborghini, but I can't afford it. But actual, like, we are going to provide health care to the American people. Well, how are you going to do it? Well, I'm going to leave that up to my colleagues in the House and the Senate. We're hoping to win back the Senate, and we control the House at the moment. And so I'm going to leave that up to them because they are closest to the people, and they'll be able to craft meaningful legislation. But when they put it on my desk, I will sign it. And that allows him to play both sides of the fence, which he is bent on doing in this campaign, obviously, right? But he didn't even do that. What he did was go on national television on several occasions and tell the American people to their face on live TV that he will veto Medicare for all. That means that in the grand scheme of things, if the Democrats do all of the work necessary to convince all the Democrats and enough Republicans, and more importantly, the American people, to support Medicare for all to a point where it goes to a Senate vote, which as of yet has not happened. If he is able to do that, right? Or if the Democrats are able to do that, he still says he will veto this. He still says, no soup for you. This is a man that personally experienced the amount of insane cost that goes into treating someone for a disease that they didn't do anything to get. Now, maybe if Beau Biden was like base jumping in Chernobyl or something, you could say like, well, bro, come on. Seriously? We have to pay for your fucking cancer? Maybe, right? But this is an act of God for all intents and purposes, right? It's a complete random chance that Beau Biden ended up getting cancer. And he is saddled with, potentially millions of dollars in medical debt. Now, he got helped out by his incredibly wealthy friend, Barack Obama, which not all of us have the opportunity. If Barack Obama wants to subsidize the American healthcare system with his personal wealth, I'd be up for that too. It just won't last very long. And so, it goes to show that the Biden campaign does not want to run for anything. They want to run against Trump and against Trump's America, right? And they just want to look steady and confident, like they have two hands on the wheel, because, Trump's driving the ship into the ground, right? Okay, but can you imagine what the electoral map would look like, right? And that's a strategy. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. We've already seen this happen, right? Hillary did a very similar style of campaigning in 2016 and got owned. Got absolutely owned. By a game show host, mind you. The man's not like some sort of high upstanding individual. He doesn't have the backing of the federal government or the backing of the electoral backing of incumbency. He was a fucking game show host at the time and a middling real estate investor. And she got owned. Owned! Trying to be like, look, he's bad. Isn't he deplorable? And Biden's trying to do the same thing. Now, coronavirus might be the chemical X in this big powder puff girl insanity that 2020 is. Coronavirus might be the chemical X that ends up killing the Trump campaign, possibly, but people are already forgetting about that and moving on. His approval numbers are going back up. And if Biden is bent on running this campaign of like, he's bad and we're going to get shit back to normal, the normal was where Joe Biden was thinking about selling his fucking house to pay for his oldest son's, his firstborn's cancer treatment. And it's not like Beau Biden was poor at the time. The man was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware. He had worked in private industry for quite some time. I mean, he was in his 50s, almost, or in his mid 40s when he died. And he's a Biden. He's amassed personal wealth that you and I probably won't in our lifetime. And he still had to go to his dad, and it would have bankrupted his dad too. Like, it was going to erase Beau Biden's financial well-being and then his father's financial well-being. It took 3 people to pay for Beau Biden's treatment, and he's an elite. And that third person had to be Barack Obama. And in the face of this, Joe Biden says that he will veto Medicare for all. Think about the gift, the gift that has been wrapped for Joe Biden to run on with that story. Instead of running that story and being like, look, can't we just get back to it? Because the point of that post is America used to be a decent place where the president would spend money out of his own pocket to save his friend. And don't you wish we had a president like that again? That's the point of that post. That's what you're supposed to get out of it, and you're supposed to get the warm and fuzzy and then go vote for Biden. Because Biden was there, and Biden was part of that, and Biden's like Barack Obama light. Right? And so you are supposed to get the idea from that we have to go back to a time of decency. And if we're all just decent, especially if our president is decent, then all of the problems will be fixed, and no one will be immiserated. And we'll all be good. Right? Because decency is the most important thing above all other shit. And when in reality, that story, you could cut a 30-second ad of that story and tag the end of it with Joe Biden saying something along the lines of, look, I didn't think that a universal healthcare system was the best way to go for this country. I was concerned about the cost. I was worried about the implications of taking people's health care away that have negotiated it through their unions. I was concerned about people not being able to select what their private insurance is, which are all completely disingenuous points and nonsense. But he said these things in the past, so he has to have a way to turn this over. And then say something like, but when I personally experienced the medical system, even as the sitting vice president of the United States, when I personally experienced the medical system and how it can bankrupt an entire family, and not only in my family did it take my son, did cancer take my son, but cancer also bankrupted his family after the fact, and would have bankrupted me if I had not worked for a decent man like Barack Obama who paid for it. Now, that's a little like, Barack Obama sauce for me, but you make the point that you need to make, which is like, bro, no one is safe from this shit. This is a barbaric system. This is a barbaric system that is not capable of saving anybody, and it is not capable of allocating the resources as necessary to provide for people when they get sick. Clearly. That is very clear. It's so clear that me, a member of the quote-unquote elite cabal in this country, nearly had to sell my home to pay for my son's treatment. I mean, can you imagine if a candidate came out and ran on that idea? It said, look, and he could even say, look, I don't know how we're going to do it. I'm going to talk to the best and brightest minds. And when I get into office, I'm going to pull people together. And my goal on day one is going to put our finest minds into a room, lock them into a room, and slide sandwiches under the door until they come up with an idea on how we can do this. Because every other organized country in the world has already done it. And instead of doing that, he is running on, I will veto it. Like, even if you can do all the work for me and I don't have to expend any of my own political capital, it doesn't bother me one bit. I don't have to run on it. I don't have to talk about it. I don't have to do interviews about it. I don't have to issue any proclamations. I don't have to sign any paperwork. Nothing. If Congress does all the work and they put it on my desk, here's the way that we're going to provide medical care for every American, period, paragraph, free at the point of service, funded through taxpayer dollars. He will veto it? And when asked to walk that back on multiple occasions, he did not. He was like, no, I would veto it. For sure. Double down. And you might say, well, Kyle, listen, he can't say that he's for universal health care in the middle of an election because he will, A, lose donors, and B, they'll call him a socialist. Guess what, bro? They're calling him a socialist anyway. They just had a week-long event at the RNC where they called Joe Biden like the head of Antifa. If you get on Facebook for 5 minutes, you're going to see your nutbag relatives sharing, hey, you should go to Antifa.com and see what happens. And it pulls up Joe Biden's website. It's not going to make any difference whatsoever. He could come out for free ponies for everybody, and it makes no difference. Joe Biden could come out next week and say, we are going to tax poor people at a 90% rate so that we can fund, ponies for every rich person in America. And the Republicans would still call him a socialist. He could come out and say, we're going to abolish taxes in this country. And they would call him a socialist. They would find a way. So this whole nonsense of like, you can't run on Medicare for all, you can't run on universal college or universal health care or eliminating student debt or reallocating money from police departments or reallocating money from our insane military budget. This whole idea that you can't do that because they're going to call you a socialist, they're doing it anyway. They're always going to do it. It's what they've always done. They're always going to do it. This was the point of running Bernie. Was that Trump could go, he's a socialist, and Bernie would go, yeah. And if socialism means that we're going to provide healthcare and education for every American, I guess that's what I am. Plus, the benefit to running Bernie against Trump was that Bernie doesn't have to have the internal conversation of like, well, I really need to raise more money than Trump because that's going to be the determiner. So I can't piss off my donors because he doesn't have any. It wouldn't even be a conversation. It would just be like, what's the best policy? Okay, cool. Let's see if we can get people to rally around that. Matter of fact, let's get on the phone with our 5 million phone bankers or door knockers or whatever the hell, and let's get the word out. And they didn't do that. They instead, people are losing their minds a little bit because, we might get a debate with Joe Rogan as the moderator, right? And I use the word might very loosely. I don't think that's going to happen, but say it did. Joe Rogan has said on his show on multiple occasions that he's not going to vote for Joe Biden because Joe Biden, his reasoning is that Joe Biden is falling apart, is that Joe Biden is just a collapsing star that is going to explode any minute, and he has dementia and all that insanity, which I would not disagree with. I'm about to do something weird and stir my coffee with my pencil because anyway. Yeah, so Joe Rogan has said on multiple occasions that he's not going to vote for Biden because he's brain-addled, which is completely true, and a reasonable reason to not vote for the guy. But he's also said on multiple occasions that he's not a Trump supporter either. And people have been freaking out about the idea that Joe Rogan would host a political debate. Here's the thing. 2 things on that. Of course Trump wants it. Of course Trump wants that debate because Trump only pays attention to 30-second clips on Twitter, and he's seen the one that goes around where Joe Rogan's like, I would rather vote for Trump than I would vote for Joe Biden. Which, in Trump's brain, means that he's endorsing him, and means that if he goes on the show, Joe's going to be nothing but nice to him. Which is not the case. Joe Rogan will absolutely own Trump. And not because he's a liberal, not because he's particularly intelligent, but just simply because he's not going to sit there and let Trump filibuster for 4 hours. When Trump starts going off about, like, listen, it's the best economy, it's the best thing that's ever happened, and people don't even believe it. When he starts all that bullshit, Joe's just going to laugh at him and be like, Jamie, can you pull up that article about how 40 million people are unemployed? Or, hey, Jamie, you remember that video we saw the other day of the 8-mile line, 2 lanes wide, of people in their cars waiting to get to the food bank in Des Moines? And Trump's just going to melt into a puddle of nothing. But Biden, because he has totally sold out to the, like, woke identity people on the left that are bent on, like, hey, if anybody disagrees with you in any way and anybody has any views that aren't completely in line with whatever we deem to be politically correct, then they are canceled and we can't platform them at all or even speak to them. This was the whole reason that they burned Bernie in effigy, because he went on Rogan. And the episode of Rogan that Bernie went on was watched by more people than watched every single Democratic debate combined. That's the sort of audience that we're talking about. That's the sort of reach that you have. And the crossover between Joe Rogan's audience and the audience of Democratic debates is nothing. You're reaching brand new people by going on Rogan. Because the people who watch Rogan are like, fuck that. I'm not spending 3 hours of my life listening to a bunch of politicians bullshit me. Most people aren't sick in the head like me and watch the debates. Most people have lives. Or, like, they don't like their intelligence being insulted over and over and over and over and over again. Ugh, that was not good. Yuck. Ugh. Yeah, and so Joe Biden has painted himself into a corner because the big D Democrats have deemed Joe Rogan to be a transphobe and a homophobe and a 9/11 truther and a moon landing truther and a flat earther and a whatever the hell, right? Now, they don't pay attention, so they don't know that Joe's come around on a lot of this stuff after talking to experts, like normal people. And they don't know that Joe Rogan pretty much aligns with the left on most issues. He just doesn't buy into all the woke identity shit that the left tends to do. And so he would be he's painted into a corner where he can't accept, because if he accepts, then the whole critique of Bernie going on the show is just complete nonsense. And they look like idiots. So he can't accept because he has to call Joe Rogan names. Because his base, the Biden base, not the Democratic base, because the Democratic base loved that Bernie went on there, because Bernie was talking to Republicans. You can go to that video today on YouTube and look through the comments and be like, wait, hold on. All these comments on the Bernie Sanders Joe Rogan is, wait, hold on, I thought this guy was crazy. Wait, hold on. When I see this guy on TV, they make him out to be crazy. They make him out to be an insane person, and they make him out to be this socialist and this person trying to steal your money and give it to other people and all that bullshit. But now that you've talked to him for an hour, Joe, and asked him just some simple questions, it seems like he's a fairly normal guy. He's a pretty regular-ass person. I mean, you're winning hearts and minds at that point. And Joe Rogan's audience does not vote. People want to say that Joe Rogan holds these views of, he's a transphobe. He said transphobic things. He said homophobic things. He said things about how 9/11 was an inside job. He said things about how like there is a global pedophile ring that is control that cabal that is controlling the entire world. He said things about, well, maybe vaccines, maybe not, maybe masks, maybe not, maybe the Earth is flat. I don't know. Like that kind of shit comes out of his mouth all the time, right? What the Democratic establishment, the big D Democrats in this world, fail to recognize is that Joe Rogan is, even if it's insane, is a moderate voter. Like, he is an American moderate. They hold wildly insane views. They are a little bit homophobic, and as a population in general, a little bit homophobic and a little bit transphobic and a little bit racist and a little bit conspiracy minded and a little bit anti-vax. And I mean, that represents the American electorate. That's why people watch Joe Rogan, is because, yes, he's a super millionaire, but he's a dumbass, and he's just telling you what he thinks, which is what most Americans do. They just go, well, I've kind of taken in all this information and I've put it through a little mixer in my brain, and this is what I came up with. I don't really have any concrete evidence for this. I don't have the time to sit around and spend, like, umpteen hours a day consuming politics or reading scientific journals or making sure that I'm using primary sources or whatever the fuck. I just turn on my social media every day, or I talk to a person that kind of knows what they're talking about, and I form my own opinion. That is what the American electorate does, because we don't have an alternative. There is no, like, actual media that's really calling balls and strikes. And so when people watch Joe Rogan, they go, well, he's not going to lie to me. Yeah, he's a moron. Like, he's an idiot, and he probably doesn't know what he's talking about certain topics and stuff. But he's not going to lie. He's not just going to make stuff up. And that's why people like him. Dave Chappelle made this point in his last stand-up, the 846 thing, where Dave Chappelle was like, look, I'm not a genius. I don't know everything. I'm not smart, but when you turn on my specials and my show, that I will lie to you. That I have no reason to lie to you. I just come up here and I tell jokes, but I tell you how I view the world, and I tell you my honest opinion. It might not be factual, it might not be actionable information, but I come up here and I'm honest with you. And I know that you respect that. And so I take that very seriously, Dave Chappelle says. Joe Rogan's exactly the same. He's like, look, I'm an idiot. And he's even said this on his show. I watched a clip the other day where, like, it went viral that he said he wasn't going to vote for Joe Biden over Trump. And he went on a show the next day, and his guest, I forget who it was, I think it was Duncan Trussell, but who cares? His guest the next day asked him, like, man, you're getting some heat. And he was like, really? I don't pay attention to Twitter. And they're like, oh yeah, they're saying that you're endorsing Trump and blah, blah, blah. And he said, what? He looks it up and he goes, listen, he looks directly into the camera and he goes, listen, if you are getting your political information from me and I'm the sole source of your political decisions and what's going into making your decision on who to vote for or what policies to support or whatever, stop doing that. I'm not smart. I don't know anything about these things. I barely pay attention. I mean, that's almost a direct quote of what he said. He understands that. But those same qualifiers apply to damn near every American. Because people don't pay attention. People don't have the headspace to consume these things. In fact, if you are hearing the sound of my voice right now, you are probably more involved than 95% of Americans in the day-to-day political things that are going on. If you are hearing the sound of my voice and you have not cut me off after 30 seconds and swiped back to your Facebook or swiped back to your Twitter or whatever after 30 seconds, then you are not who he's talking to. And you are not who I'm talking about. You are probably a person who is going to vote. You are probably a person who is going to pay attention to whether or not healthcare is being taken care of. You're probably a person that is worried about the numbers that are coming out about the economy. You are probably a person that knows that immigration is not a problem. We're not talking about the same group of people. The dynamic is the same that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, which is like, Biden has a cluster of people, a cluster of folks that are going to vote. Trump has a cluster of folks that are going to vote. And you need these people that aren't going to vote, haven't voted, aren't interested in voting, think that that are so alienated by our political discourse, and rightfully so, that they don't want to participate. And not only do they not want to participate, but they don't want to jump through the hoops necessary to participate. I don't know, like, I live in Texas, right? And we got our letter about early voting yesterday. Hey, if you want to early vote, these are the dates, make sure that you're registered, blah, 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 right? So if I want to early in-person vote, the entire state of Texas only early votes for president for 2 days. 2 days. And it's like October 29th through October 31st. Okay, so that's like a Thursday through Saturday, right? Okay, so in the middle of a global pandemic, I have to rearrange homeschooling my children, working from home, not being able to send my kids to daycare or school, making sure that I'm personally safe, wearing a mask and taking all the precautions necessary, and stand in line for hours, because the entire state of Texas has to early vote in 2 days. And standing in line for hours, which means that I potentially can't get work done, or go to work if I happen to be an essential worker and have to be at my place of business. So I have to take time out of my day, several hours in fact, to go to a place to vote for a system that I'm so alienated by that I don't think it works. And I don't think my vote counts. Which you would not be wrong in saying that. You would not be wrong in saying that, because the popular vote has not determined the winner of the last 3 of the last 5 elections. 3 of the last 5 elections, the popular vote, well, actually I think it's 3 of the last 6. The popular vote winner did not go to the White House. So, yes, in that insane system, there is this big group of people up here that are completely alienated. They don't think that their vote matters. They don't think that the actions that they take politically mean dick. And so they just are like, well, screw it. I'm not going to take time out of my day and cost myself money and effort and time and like the ability to school my children and all that bullshit. And I'm going to put my health at risk this time around to go and stand in a line for hours. You have to give these people will do that. These people will do that. Now, these people will do that because it's an existential threat to democracy. And haven't you seen there's a Cheeto in the White House? And these people will do it because they want to own the libs. And so they will do it in a big number. Like I want to say it was the North Carolina elections that just happened, but I could be wrong. Might have been Rhode Island. But anyway, it doesn't matter for the point. The white turnout was up 180%. Minority turnout down. White turnout up 180%. I think we know what that means. I think we know what that means electorally. Is that like, there is backlash coming. These people are going to vote because he's done nothing but go, they're going to steal it, they're going to steal it, they're going to steal it, they're going to steal it. They're rigging the election. They're rigging the election. Make sure you go and vote in person. These people are going to get up and vote. And at historic rates. This is the reason that it's very important to go and vote in person, if you can do it, for Joe Biden so that you can run up the score if necessary. Because these people are in backlash mode. They are going to come out. And I think I've made clear my thoughts on Biden in general, but if you're saying that the only thing that you're taking into account is that less people will be immiserated, or the same amount of people will be immiserated, but it will be different people, so we give the people who have been immiserated under Trump a little bit of a break. If that is your sole equation here, then go and vote in person. But anyway, these people will go and vote. They will stand in the line, and they will take time out of their day, the Biden people, and they will I'm doing this for my country. And they will go and do it. The Trump people will go and do it to own the libs. These people up here will still not go and do it because you are not giving them anything to vote for. And the people in this group that will go and do it will do it to own the libs. And the identitarians. And all the like race baiting bullshit that we're doing right now. and identity-based bullshit that we're doing right now. They will go, a certain segment of this third group of people, which is huge, by the way. I think it's like 60% of the country. A certain sliver of those people will go and vote just to own the libs, because the libs are annoying. And if you don't give those people something to vote for, if you don't give those people something to affirmatively go to the polls and say, I am pulling the lever so that I have health care, or I am pulling the lever so that I don't have to stress endlessly about sending my kids to college, or I'm pulling the lever because my son is in Afghanistan and I am fucking sick of being at war for 2 decades. Pick your policy. If you give people a reason to go to the polls and pull the lever, you will get these people to vote. They will go through the little bit of work, comparatively, that it takes. You know, if you said to a regular person, like Joe Rogan, with Joe Rogan brain, hey, listen, yes, you have to go and register. You have to stand in a long line. You have to put your personal health at risk. And you only have a 2-day window, or 1 day on election day, to do it. But in exchange, you will have health care for the rest of your life. Free at the point of service. Paid for with your tax dollars. You will have your children and their children and their children will be able to go to college without incurring a massive amount of debt. We are, you know, how the entire West Coast is on fire? We are going to institute a jobs program surrounding fundamentally transforming our relationship with fossil fuels and the environment. Employing millions of people to move us to solar and wind and hydropower. Employing millions of people, incentivizing the automotive industry, if not nationalizing it, to employ millions of people to transform the way that we build cars. Employing millions of people to build a actual, robust, usable, really utilitarian public transport system. These people up here will go to the polls. They will do that work to vote for you. But if your sales pitch is, Trump has been bad, right? And we're going to go back to pre-Trump land. These people up here were still getting screwed pre-Trump land. White, black, orange, purple, doesn't matter. They were getting screwed in pre-Trump world also. And so they're like, okay, so I might as well not do anything. I might as well just sit here and not do anything because that sucked too. And nobody is making a case to me that me voting is going to improve my material conditions. Not how I feel about America. Not how much I have to be involved in politics. Not how upset other people are. Not how alienated I am by all of the Trumpism and the Bidenism and all that bullshit. No. And the political party bullshit that we are living in. No. It's not going to alleviate any of those things. It's just going to, like, me going to vote is just going to make white liberal elites feel better. And this plays back into my theory, which is that the Democrats don't want to win. They don't want to win because they would have to do something. Because here's here's how the demise of the Democratic Party plays out, right? If you elect somebody that actually runs on something, a Bernie, an AOC, whatever the hell, right? And to be president, I mean, because that's the only way that regular, normal, everyday Americans walking around on the street participate in politics in any meaningful way. If you elect somebody like that says, I'm going to give you A, B, and C, that is going to materially improve your life, and they get into office and try to get their agenda passed and fail, right? And then they give you nothing And in fact, because of the conditions that existed when they came into office that are just perpetually getting worse, after 4 years of their presidency, because they failed to institute these broad changes, people's material lives will be worse. Now, the economy might be stronger, the stonks might be up, like whatever the fuck, but people's material lives will be worse because the snowball is still rolling down the hill. And if that is the case, people will blame the president because that's what happens. That's how you do politics in America, is you blame the president or you cheer the president, depending on what your material conditions are, because that's how we've been trained as a society to think that politics works, which it's not, but that's how the American brain works. And so you will get blamed and you will get voted out and we will get an insane person. Do you know how I know that that's the case? Because that's what happened to Barack Obama. It just took 8 years. Barack Obama ran on broadly changing America. People forget, Barack Obama essentially ran on Medicare for all. He ran on ending the wars. He ran on providing people with education. I mean, he ran on the Bernie platform, essentially. Now, granted, he tempered it with a lot of folksiness and a lot of like, don't boo, vote, and all that bullshit. And he, wooed people to sleep with his like nice way of talking. And, he was totally selling us out through the back door, of course, right? As soon as he took office, like, he just cut all those people off. All the people that worked hard to get him elected, he cut them all off and moved Citibank into the White House, and we didn't get any of that shit. But he ran on a quasi-Bernie platform, right? Failed to implement any of these things and got absolutely and completely owned by the Republican majority that he was up against. I mean, owned to the point that, like, he nominated a Supreme Court justice a year and a half before he was going to leave office, and they told him to pound sand, and he said, okay. I mean, owned. Owned! And people looked at that and went, oh, well, he lied. Which, in his case, he did. He lied. Straight up. And what did we get? In the absence of actual change, we will get somebody who promises to lob a grenade at the whole thing, which was Trump. So this experiment has been played out. If Joe Biden gets into office, which is a big, giant, huge, monumental if at this point, if Joe Biden gets into office and fails to change the material conditions of the average American, and that means radical changes in things like healthcare, education, climate change, believe it or not, because the entire West Coast is on fire. We have double hurricanes and tornadoes and shit. Like, shit is getting bad, folks. Massive floods. Enormous climate catastrophes. If Joe Biden is elected and does not, almost immediately, because you only got 4 years to determine this, almost immediately change the material conditions of Americans, average Americans, working Americans, then 4 years from now, we will be really staring into the face of fascism. Because you will get somebody on the right who is not as dumb as Trump, and not as ineffectual, and not as bumbling. You will get somebody who has watched Trump. I'm looking at you, Tom Cotton, Dan Crenshaw. You will get somebody who has watched Trump do what he's trying to do and mostly bumble it because he says the quiet part out loud, or because he doesn't fill out the paperwork correctly, or his Justice Department drops the ball, or Bill Barr's fucks up a signature line here and there, and the Supreme Court throws it out. They are sitting right now watching, going like, okay, don't do that, do this. Don't do that, do this. And when they get into office, they will not say the quiet part out loud, and they will fill out all the right paperwork, and it will only take them 4 years for us to descend into full-on fascism. Actual, real fascism. If Joe Biden gets into office and does not materially change the conditions of people's lives, because people will not have patience. We are at a crisis point in the history of the world right now. with climate change. And we are at a crisis point in the history of America with the state of the economy and the living conditions of regular people. And you could argue, just like the Obama experiment has played out before, and that's what led to Trump, this experiment has been played elsewhere before. And when you immiserate people, you can go back and watch this. When the New York Times did that insane thing where they released all of they were screwed, right? The New York Times released all of their endorsement interviews because they had painted themselves into a corner. And so they made a big thing out of, this is what our endorsement's going to be, and then endorsed two people, neither of which are on the ticket. Right? Endorsed two people in the Democratic primary, which has never been done, and one of the left in Elizabeth Warren, and the other of the actual establishment Democrat in Amy Klobuchar. And they got to run around and say, look, we're not choosing sides here. We think that there's a point to each ideological debate, but really, we're doing identity politics, so we got to have a woman. Right? And in doing that, they released all of their interviews for their endorsement. They sat down with each candidate and asked them questions, and that's how they determined their endorsement, which is not how they determined their endorsement. They already knew who they were going to pick, but whatever. And in Bernie's interview, they asked him, can you explain, the question was something like, can you explain the dramatic shift? This country elected Barack Obama twice. Can you explain the dramatic shift of people from Barack Obama to Donald Trump, who is clearly playing into racist sentiments and using race to bait people and dog whistling? And Bernie's answer was, look, we had the opportunity to materially provide for people. We had the opportunity to, in a time where, he says something like, life expectancy in the United States is going down because of diseases of despair. People are drinking more. People are doing more drugs. We have more homeless people than we ever have had before. People are completely immiserated by the way that our society has been structured. And someone came along and said, we are going to improve your material conditions, and then it didn't pan out. For whatever reason, it didn't pan out. And when people are so miserable, and when people feel so alienated and powerless in the face of that situation, where they are literally being screwed as hard as humanly possible, when that is the case, they will accept a scapegoat. When somebody comes out and says, hey, there's 11 million undocumented immigrants living here, illegal immigrants living here, if we just boot those people out, we can give people their jobs back and we can improve the economy. Hey, China's taking advantage of our intellectual property, and China's doing this and China's doing that, and China sent a virus and yada, 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 yada. We can do that, fuck them, and we can put tariffs on them, and we can disown them as a country and dramatically decrease our standing with the other superpower in the world, the other hyperpower in the world. It'll solve Americans' problems. Or, hey, look, it's Ilhan Omar with her turban and her Islam that's coming to destroy our way of life. And that's the reason that she's been, she's in office and she thinks America deserved 9/11 and yada, 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 whatever the fuck. Right? And in the absence of actual material change provided by the people who are supposed to do it, someone else coming in can scapegoat people and make it somebody else's fault and promise that if we just fix those people and protect the suburbs, if you will, then life will go back to normal. You will have the prosperity that your parents and grandparents had in this country, and we will be a great superpower again because there won't be so many moochers and freeloaders and bums that are taking advantage of our resources. Does any of that sound familiar? Well, we've done that experiment as the human race before, and it did not work out so well. We had an entire world war about it. Because in the 1930s, Germany was in a very, very, very similar condition. They were, after the debt of World War I, and the amazing amount of class disparity between regular working Germans and the elite Germans who were descended from like kings and shit and dukes and all that bullshit. There was so much disparity there. And the globe the entire world had decided to saddle Germany with with most of the war debt from World War One. Instead of being like, okay, let's move on. That was horrible. The cost was horrific. One of them, I mean, World War One was the first time that we had modern weapons, but we're still fighting like we were in the Civil War. And so an untold amount of people were killed in some of the most brutal ways possible. I mean, it was horrific. And it was literally just, like, World War One could have been completely avoided. All that it was just a bunch of rich people getting together and being like, well, my peasants can beat your peasants, let's go. And after Germany was saddled with that debt, because you have to remember, or you should know, that before that, Germany, Berlin specifically, was one of the most democratic, liberal societies in the world. They had like 52 papers, 52 independent newspapers being printed every day with differing opinions, with robust amount of conversation. They were restructuring their government around the idea of like more democracy. Especially after they had, gotten rid of royal rule and, feudalism, essentially. They had moved into a system where they valued democracy, and democracy was the most important thing. And not only democracy, but a liberal democracy, right? Like, looking at it as the furtherance of the human race, not the conservation of culture, right? Well, that didn't work, because they were saddled with all this external debt. Inflation, we all heard the stories of like you would go to the store to buy a loaf of bread at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it'd be $13 for a loaf of bread. And by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it was $300. Inflation was hyperinflation was just completely insane. People were completely immiserated by the state of their economy. And in reaction to that, somebody showed up and said, hey, the reason that you are experiencing these conditions is because of the Jews. The reason that you are experiencing this is we have a certain percentage of our country that is living here with all the money and is taking advantage of the resources that Germany provides. And we have to protect the fatherland. We have to make sure that Germany is for Germans. And we need to put Germany first. And we need to make sure that we are extinguishing the people in this country who are freeloading on your tax dollars, who are stealing money from you, who are preventing you from having a job that pays your bills and feeds your family. And that didn't work immediately, right? Like, Hitler got thrown in prison. There was a big giant backlash. You had Antifa involved at that point. I mean, there was a whole bunch of time that it took, but finally the right wing in Germany realized that, like, oh, this is working. And if we give this institutional backing, if we actually gather around this Hitler guy, we could assume power. Anti-Semite, not anti-Semite, whatever, doesn't matter. If we all circle the wagons around this Hitler guy, we can assume power. And institutions will protect their access to power first. That is just a fact of life. If you have an institution with people in it, they will protect their access to power before they will protect people's rights or people's lives or people's material conditions. Because they think, Elizabeth Warren has this problem, they think that, well, yes, I'm making a trade morally, and yes, I'm making a trade on this policy, but I'm the best person for this position because if I'm in power, then I have people's best interests at heart. And eventually, down the road, I will be able to affect the change that I'm looking for. But if I'm not in power, then I'll never have that opportunity. And so they make trades. And this was a big one. They traded to maybe down the road be able to make that sort of change for Hitler. And we know how that played out. But that didn't play out in a vacuum. That's not like, Hitler showed... I think as kids, we were taught that, like, Hitler showed up and he was very convincing, and therefore people were like, great. And they were mesmerized by his super mustache or whatever. when in reality, people had reached a state of material conditions that they were so broken and so desperate for a solution that they went, well, at least this guy's giving me something. Like, at least this guy's giving me an outlet and a air vent for my frustration with the way that our society is working, and therefore that's our guy. We'll take that guy, and we could try it out. We'll try it out. This guy seems kind of crazy, and he's pretty hilarious, and we'll try it out and see what happens. Well, they never had time to fix that because he just assumed power. He burned the Reichstag, assumed power, and then never left until he shot himself, allegedly. And that was that. And then post World War II, the rest of the world got together, realizing this dynamic. Again, this did not occur in a vacuum. The entire world could see this. After World War II, most of the civilized world got together. Even Japan, who had been bombed into oblivion unnecessarily by the United States, got together and made the decision that, like, look, if we never want to do this again. We've had World War I, which was horrific, and we've had World War II, which led to the deaths of more people in any other war combined. Millions and millions of people displaced, immiserated, literally burned to death in a concentration camp. We have to figure out how to prevent this from happening again, because it is clearly a inevitability if you immiserate people and create miserable conditions within society. And so the rest of the organized world got together: Spain, France, Italy, Japan, China, Russia. We have to rebuild, because we're all reduced to rubble at this point. The United States was the only major country that did not suffer actual physical damage on the homeland, other than Pearl Harbor, on American soil in World War II, because of our location, because of our geographic situation. And so every other superpower in the world was reduced to rubble, essentially. And if they weren't physically, they definitely were economically. And the United States had no such issue, because they didn't have to deal with rebuilding. And they had been churning out goods, weapons, and material for war for a decade at this point, and selling it to other countries, and literally just banking money, and creating a robust war chest and economy. And that, plus the absence of any sort of rebuilding needing to be done, we were way ahead. But the rest of the countries in the world had been reduced to ash. And so they were like, well, shit, if we have to rebuild this thing, which we do, from the ground up, essentially, because our country has either been physically destroyed or economically destroyed, if we have to rebuild this thing, then we are going to rebuild it with the idea in mind that if you create those material conditions for people, it will lead to fascism. Maybe not today, maybe not 4 years from now, maybe not 20 years from now, but eventually, if people are immiserated enough, they will look to someone to scapegoat their problems. To scapegoat their problems onto someone else. And we have to build a government that prevents, on a very basic level, the general population being immiserated to that point. Now, that doesn't mean that they created completely egalitarian societies. That doesn't mean that they created utopias. That just means that they said, look, we need to provide for people's basic needs. We need to make sure that people are housed, that people have medical care, that people are able to get an education so that they can advance in society, that we provide jobs for people, that we maintain an economy that is robust, but also insulated from outside influence, that we separate the elites in this country from the way that it is run, in a way that it doesn't look like a small group of, an oligarchy is controlling our country. Now, those reforms have been slowly chipped away at by corporatism and capitalism over the last, 70, 80 years, to where you have places like the UK that are very close to the United States, and Canada, which is only several years behind the United States as far as how their economy is playing out and the political conditions of their people. But Australia, same way. But the impetus of like, dude, we've got to prevent these conditions from happening again, instituted the social democracies around the world. Australia, New Zealand, Germany, France, Italy, the UK, Japan, China. Well, not China, but Japan. That said, look, we are going to provide this baseline safety net of existence for people. So that even if it goes to shit, even if everything goes to shit, our first priority, our first expenditure of resources, you see this with the Scandinavian countries. Granted, they're sitting on, trillions of gallons of oil, and so, they're in a good position to pay for it. But still, you see this in the Scandinavian countries and most of Europe. Even Eastern Europe. We are going to provide a safety net for people so that even if everything at the top goes to shit, even if the country, the economy crashes, we have a pandemic, whatever. People's basic needs are taken care of. This is why in the UK they absolutely worship the NHS. And you will never, it's getting defunded, and they're attacking it as much as possible from the right. But people, if you put abolish the NHS on the ballot, it'd be an 80-20 vote. Fuck you. No, we're keeping it. Because people understand that through things like unemployment or universal basic income or whatever you want to call it, socialized medicine, socialized education, completely socialized infrastructure that makes sure that our cities are in good condition, and you can travel from place to place fairly inexpensively. They increase the mobility of your working population. Those things, if you provide those things at a basic level, then you increase the floor of normal people, and you make the ceiling for accepting fascism and buying into insane right-wing nutjobbery much, 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 much higher. And the world understood that. They were like, look, it's going to cost a shitload of money to provide people with these things. It is going to cost us a good portion of our GDP. We might not be able to amass a massive military or a massive war chest of money because we are providing these things for our citizens. However, the theory goes, and so far it has held true, we are slipping into a situation where it's not, but that's not the fault of these countries, that's the fault of the United States directly. So far it has held true that if you provide these material conditions, we don't need a big army. We don't need a big military. We don't need a big giant war chest just in case somebody decides to bomb us. Because they're not gonna. Because most of the advanced world realizes that, it's never these rich people who get to make the decisions that have to suit up and go to war. It's always us. It's always regular people. And so, screw that. I'm not going to vote for a guy that says he's going to bomb XYZ. I mean, you saw this with the UK after 9/11. Yeah, they got involved, but they were like, and Tony Blair in particular was a complete cretin and goblin about it, and they got involved, but they were at an arm's length, right? They were like, we're not putting ground troops in Iraq. Like, if you want to go get your boy, we'll fly the Royal Air Force in there and help you, do some strategic targeting and all that kind of stuff. But we're not going to get directly involved. We're not going to put boots on the ground. We've already done that imperialist shit for the last 600 years. We're not going to do that anymore. Screw that. It doesn't work out. And the people of the UK would not have stood for it. Because of that reason. And when your main export, as it is for the United States, when your main export is violence and military force, and there is nothing to do other than go and imperialize a large portion of the world. Those are your only options. And in the discourse of American politics today, the question is, how are you going to pay for it? Right? How are we going to pay for healthcare and education and infrastructure and climate change fixes? How are you possibly going to pay for it? Well, We were faced with this decision as a human race before, and most of the countries on Earth made the seemingly correct decision in saying, like, look, we're going to pay for it by paying for it and deal with the outcomes later. Because it is more important to give this safety net to people and stave off a global war and uprising and insane violence than it is to be ready and only fund a force that is ready for global war and sustained violence. Because that's the problem that the United States has had for the last 70 years, is that's all that we're geared for. Is like, oh, they're fucking up over there, we gotta go. You see this in Vietnam, Korea, Desert Storm, the current Gulf War that we're having. Is that's the only thing that we know how to produce. It's the only way that we know that it's where most of the investment in our economy goes. Because we never sat down after World War II and had the conversation of like, look, we have to provide material conditions for people that avoid this situation. We just never did it. We instead said, wow, that worked out really well. The fact that we just churned out nothing but bombs and did manufacturing and all that bullshit. And look at all this money that we made. Let's just keep riding this train. Which at the time probably seemed logical. You know, at the time, it probably seemed logical that, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's keep riding this train. We'll build up our military. We'll make sure that if fascism arises again, we can stomp it out. Because at that point, people were like, well, I mean, Hitler came to power like that, and this could happen again any day in any other country. So we got to make sure that we're ready. That made all the sense in the world in 1946. But as the world moved on, and the surrounding, the rest of the organized world created conditions that would release the pressure on regular people so that Hitler was way less likely. Now, it's happened, but a Hitler and a Mussolini were way less likely. Because people's material conditions were universally taken care of, and therefore it promoted this idea of like universality and communal connection between society, between all the members of society. Because that was done, and we didn't do it, we're the last war power that needs to exist, and it's all that we know how to do, and we've been doing it for so long at this point that to stop doing it, to stop doing it would be like going down the road at 100 miles an hour and throwing your car in reverse. Something is going to break at some point. So, yeah. Anyway. That was over an hour. That was a blur. I'm glad I got that out this morning. I'm going to go teach my kid now because we live at the end of the world.